May 2nd, 1863. The Confederate Army of Northern Virginia has just pulled off the most daring military maneuver of the entire Civil War. General Stonewall Jackson, the South's most feared and brilliant battlefield commander, has led 28,000 troops on a secret 15-mile march through dense Virginia wilderness to blindside the Union's exposed right flank. The attack is devastating. Union soldiers are caught eating dinner. Some flee without their boots. The Confederate line surges forward like a wave no one saw coming. Victory at Chancellorsville seems not just possible, it seems inevitable. The Union Army of the Potomac, 130,000 men strong, is retreating in chaos. General Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson are one decisive night assault away from the most complete triumph the South has ever achieved. Perhaps the most complete of the entire war. Then, at approximately 9:30 p.m., everything stops. Not because of a Union bullet, not because of a Union counterattack, but because of confusion in the dark. A volley of Confederate musket fire tears through the night, and the man those soldiers just shot is their own greatest general. Within 8 days, Stonewall Jackson is dead, and the Confederacy will never be the same. Thomas Jonathan Jackson was born on January 21, 1824, in Clarksburg, Virginia, now West Virginia. Orphaned young, raised by an uncle, and largely self-educated, he was an unlikely candidate for military legend. He was awkward, intensely private, deeply religious, and famously eccentric. He sucked on lemons. He refused to eat pepper because he believed it weakened his left leg. He raised one arm during prayer to keep his body in balance with God. Yet this strange, quiet man would become the most feared general the Confederacy ever produced. After graduating from West Point in 1846 and serving in the Mexican-American War, he became a professor at the Virginia Military Institute in Lexington, Virginia, where he was considered a poor, dull teacher by most of his students. When Virginia seceded from the Union in 1861, Jackson left the classroom and entered military history. He earned his famous nickname at the First Battle of Bull Run in 1861, where General Barnard B. reportedly called out, "There stands Jackson like a stone wall." His reputation exploded in 1862 with his legendary Shenandoah Valley campaign, widely considered one of the most brilliant campaigns in American military history. With just 17,000 men marching 646 miles in 48 days, he pinned down 3 separate Union armies totaling 52,000 troops, preventing them from reinforcing the assault on Richmond. That single campaign confirmed what Lee already knew. Jackson was not just a good general, he was irreplaceable. By the spring of 1863, Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson had developed one of the most extraordinary command partnerships in the history of warfare. Lee was the strategic architect, calm, measured, brilliant at reading the larger picture. Jackson was the executioner, aggressive, secretive, and capable of moving troops with a speed that left enemy commanders bewildered. Their working relationship was built on trust so complete it bordered on the telepathic. Lee would give Jackson a broad objective and trust him completely to figure out how to achieve it. Jackson, in turn, obeyed Lee's orders with precision while showing total independence in execution. No other general in the Confederate Army enjoyed this level of mutual confidence with Lee. Together, they had already achieved the near impossible. At 2nd Manassas in August 1862, Jackson's swift flank march set up Lee's crushing counterattack that sent another Union army reeling. At Fredericksburg in December 1862, the combination held the Confederate line so firmly that Union General Ambrose Burnside's frontal assaults became a massacre. Each victory deepened the Southern belief that as long as Lee and Jackson fought together, the Confederacy could overcome any numerical disadvantage. At Chancellorsville, this partnership was about to reach its absolute peak, a plan so bold, so dangerous, and so perfectly executed that military historians still study it today. And it would be the last great plan they ever made together. By late April 1863, Union General Joseph "Fighting Joe" Hooker had assembled the largest and best-equipped army in American history, 130,000 men, and was marching confidently toward the Confederate lines near Chancellorsville, Virginia. He wrote to President Lincoln, "The enemy must either ingloriously fly or come out from behind his defenses and give us battle on our own ground." He was certain of victory. Lee had fewer than 60,000 men. By conventional military logic, there was no path to victory. So Lee and Jackson chose an unconventional one, and arguably the most audacious military gamble of the Civil War. Jackson would take 28,000 troops, nearly the entire Confederate fighting strength, on a 15-mile flanking march through dense, tangled woodland known as the Wilderness, completely hidden from Union observation. Lee would hold the remaining lines with barely 14,000 men against a force nearly 10 times their size. If Hooker discovered the march midway, the Confederate army would be split and destroyed. Everything depended on speed, secrecy, and Jackson's nerve. On May 2nd, 1863, it worked beyond anyone's expectations. Union troops on the right flank were eating dinner, stacking rifles, and watching deer burst from the tree line when the Confederate assault struck. The attack was, as one Union officer later wrote, like the fury of the wildest hailstorm. The entire Union right flank collapsed, driven back nearly 3 miles. Chancellorsville was Lee's masterpiece. And then, hours later, it became his deepest wound. Even as the Confederate Army celebrated the stunning success of the flank attack on the evening of May 2nd, Stonewall Jackson was already thinking ahead. The Union Army was shaken, but not destroyed. Hooker still had massive reserves. Jackson wanted to press forward immediately, a rare night assault to cut off the Union Army's line of retreat entirely and turn a tactical victory into total annihilation. At approximately 9 p.m., true to his restless nature, Jackson gathered a small party of staff officers and aides and rode forward beyond Confederate lines to personally scout the terrain between the armies. This was wholly characteristic. Jackson never trusted second-hand reports when he could see the ground himself. He had done it 100 times before. The woods were pitch black. Exhausted Confederate troops had been fighting and marching for over 12 hours. Forward units, particularly the 18th North Carolina Infantry, had been explicitly warned to watch for Union cavalry that had been probing the lines. No one had informed them that their commanding general was riding ahead in the darkness. As Jackson's party turned back toward Confederate lines, a nervous picket called out a challenge. Before Jackson's aide, Lieutenant Joseph Morrison, could clearly identify the riders, a soldier shouted, and multiple volleys rang out. Morrison screamed, "Cease firing! You are firing into your own men!" The response from the darkness was chilling. "It's a lie." And the firing continued. The volleys from the 18th North Carolina Infantry tore through Jackson's party. 3 bullets struck the general himself, 2 in the left arm, shattering the bone, and 1 through the right palm. Several of his staff were killed outright. His horse, Little Sorrel, reared in terror and carried the wounded Jackson toward Union lines before aides managed to seize the reins. Jackson was helped from his saddle, placed on a litter, and carried through dark woods under continuing Union artillery fire. At one agonizing point, the litter bearers stumbled and dropped him, worsening his blood loss. Despite being in severe pain, Jackson remained conscious and composed, even managing to direct the evacuation of other wounded soldiers he passed. At the field hospital, Jackson's chief surgeon, Dr. Hunter Holmes McGuire, examined the wounds by lantern light and delivered a grim verdict. The left arm could not be saved. The bone was completely shattered, and infection, without amputation, was certain. Jackson agreed immediately, without drama. The surgery was performed in the early hours of May 3rd. McGuire removed the left arm close to the shoulder. Afterward, Jackson reportedly thanked the doctor with characteristic calm. When Robert E. Lee received the news, he sent a now legendary message. Give General Jackson my affectionate regards, and say to him, he has lost his left arm, but I have lost my right arm. It was not simply sentiment, it was a precise military assessment. For the first few days after surgery, the South dared to hope. Jackson was moved 17 miles southeast to Guinea Station, a quieter location away from battle, where he seemed to stabilize. He spoke with his wife Anna, who had rushed to his bedside with their infant daughter Julia. He discussed returning to command. Doctors were cautiously optimistic. Confederate newspapers ran hopeful headlines across the South. But on May 7th, everything changed. Jackson developed a high fever. Pneumonia had set in, almost certainly a combination of exposure during the cold, rainy night of the wounding, the blood loss, and the shock of surgery. In 1863, before antibiotics, pneumonia was a death sentence. His condition deteriorated rapidly. He drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes shouting battlefield commands, "Order A.P. Hill to prepare for action," and push the columns forward. By May 10th, a quiet calm descended over him. His wife held his hand. His breathing slowed. His last recorded words, spoken on that Sunday afternoon at approximately 3:15 p.m., have become among the most quoted in American history. "Let us cross over the river and rest under the shade of the trees." Thomas Jonathan Stonewall Jackson died at the age of 39. The man who had never lost a battle to superior numbers had been killed by his own soldiers in a spring rainstorm. The news of Jackson's death hit the Confederacy like a physical blow. In Richmond, flags flew at half-mast. Church bells rang continuously for days. Shops closed. Citizens stood in stunned silence in the streets. His body was taken to lie in state at the Confederate Executive Mansion, where thousands came to pay their respects. Soldiers wept openly. Veterans who had never broken under enemy fire broke down completely at the news. Jackson had become something beyond a general. He was a symbol. To devout Southerners, he embodied God's favor on the Confederate cause. His piety was as famous as his battlefield prowess. He held prayer meetings in camp. He fasted on Sundays and sometimes refused to open mail delivered on the Sabbath. When he fell, many felt that heaven itself had turned against the South. In the Army of Northern Virginia, the grief was personal and profound. One soldier wrote in his diary, "We have lost our right arm. The Army will never be the same again." Another wrote, "The men worship his memory. When Jackson was alive, we believed we could do anything." The morale that had peaked after Chancellorsville evaporated almost overnight. What should have been the South's proudest week had become its most sorrowful. Robert E. Lee, who rarely showed emotion in public, was visibly shaken. He later wrote, "I know not how to replace him." It was an honest admission and a warning of what was coming. Grief aside, the death of Stonewall Jackson was a concrete, irreplaceable military catastrophe. Jackson's battlefield genius was not simply a matter of courage or experience, it was a unique system of warfare. His troops, nicknamed foot cavalry, could march up to 25 miles in a single day, appearing exactly where the enemy least expected them. During the Valley Campaign of 1862, his 17,000 men had marched 646 miles in 48 days, winning 5 battles and tying down 52,000 Union troops at a cost of fewer than 2,700 Confederate casualties. That kind of performance cannot be replicated by committee. Jackson's system depended on total secrecy. He shared his plans with almost no one, combined with relentless, independent offensive initiative. He didn't wait for orders to seize an opportunity. He seized it and informed Lee afterward. No other Confederate general could be trusted to operate with that level of autonomy and that level of reliability. After Jackson died, Lee reorganized the Army of Northern Virginia into 3 corps. Richard Ewell took Jackson's old 2nd Corps. A.P. Hill was given the new 3rd Corps. James Longstreet retained the first. All three were competent officers. None were Stonewall Jackson. Ewell was cautious where Jackson had been bold. Hill was aggressive but erratic. Longstreet was methodical and frequently clashed with Lee's instinct for audacity. Lee, who had once split his army in the face of a force twice his size with total confidence, would never again show that same willingness to gamble on a subordinate's brilliance. The Army of Northern Virginia could still fight. It could no longer perform miracles. 2 months after Jackson's death, the Army of Northern Virginia marched into Pennsylvania. The Battle of Gettysburg, July 1st to 3rd, 1863, would become the bloodiest 3 days in American history and the decisive turning point of the Civil War. And Jackson's absence hung over every critical decision. On July 1st, Confederate forces drove the Union Army back through Gettysburg and up to Cemetery Hill, a commanding piece of high ground that, if seized immediately, could have given the Confederates an unassailable position. Confederate General Richard Ewell, who commanded Jackson's old corps, was ordered to take the hill if practicable. He hesitated. He decided it was not practicable. The Union Army dug in overnight. The if practicable order, and Ewell's caution, became one of the most debated decisions in military history. Members of Jackson's former staff were explicit. Jackson would have taken that hill without waiting for permission. As Douglas Southall Freeman wrote in his definitive study Lee's Lieutenants, in a chapter pointedly titled "Jackson is Not Here," the absence was felt in every hesitation, every lost moment. A panel of 20 Civil War historians surveyed by the Civil War Monitor was divided on whether Jackson would have changed Gettysburg's outcome, but nearly all agreed on one thing. With Jackson alive, the battle, and possibly the entire campaign, would have been fundamentally different. The Confederacy's greatest opportunity died with its greatest general. In death, Stonewall Jackson became something the living man never sought, a myth. Monuments to him rose across the South. Streets, schools, and military units bore his name. The narrative that formed around him, especially through the Lost Cause movement that emerged after Confederate defeat, portrayed him as the perfect Christian soldier whose death had made Confederate victory impossible. If Jackson had lived, we would have won, became almost a catechism of Southern grief. This mythology served a political purpose. By attributing Confederate defeat largely to Jackson's absence, along with other contingencies, Lost Cause writers preserved Robert E. Lee's reputation while deflecting attention from the structural realities that doomed the Confederacy: inferior industry, smaller population, an economy built on enslaved labor that the world was increasingly unwilling to support, and a Union with the will and resources to grind the war to its conclusion. Serious military historians treat Jackson's legacy with more nuance. He was genuinely one of the most gifted tactical commanders in American history. That assessment is not disputed. His Valley Campaign remains a textbook study in maneuver warfare taught at military academies worldwide. But historians caution against the simplistic, "if Jackson had lived" argument. Wars are not won or lost on a single general, and the Union's structural advantages were enormous and growing. What is not disputed is this: the night of May 2nd, 1863, changed the Civil War. One moment of darkness, one failure of communication, one trigger pulled in panic, and a nation's fate shifted. Stonewall Jackson's story is history at its most brutal and most human. He was not killed in a heroic charge against the enemy. He was not brought down by some Union military mastermind. He was shot by exhausted, frightened young men in the dark who were doing exactly what they had been trained to do, and had simply not been told their general was riding in front of them. That is the real lesson buried beneath the legend. History does not always turn on grand strategies or inevitable forces. Sometimes it turns on a single panicked shout in the dark. Sometimes the greatest blow comes not from the enemy, but from within. 8 days after those shots rang out in the Virginia wilderness, the South's greatest general spoke his last words and crossed over the river. The Confederacy followed him just 2 years later. Thank you for watching.